All right, it's time. Welcome to your second MinneWiADS session on Walk Through the Door of Discomfort with Robin Brown. Robin is the Chief Information Officer, Cargill North America Protein. Robin is recognized as a transformational leader in the industry. She is a cultural change agent. She is known for driving technology-enabled innovation and strategic business transformation. She is also a passionate community leader, especially empowering women and girls in STEM. Very impressive. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please put your questions you would like to ask Robin in the chat window during the session. The discomfort we face throughout the life can seem overwhelming. It can seem like the uncertainty or the fear will keep you down forever, unable to move forward. But if you take charge and walk through the door of discomfort rather than avoiding them, that gives you the freedom to make the choices you want to make, rather than letting opportunities pass you by for the fear of failing. In this session, Robin will share her career journey and speak about how to lean into discomfort. Welcome, Robin. It's wonderful to have you here at our very first MinneWiADS conference.
Thank you, Diane. I appreciate the introduction. Wow, what a really cool virtual conference. Really interesting to have this many top-notch women that are coming together to talk about important topics like technology, analytics, and data science. So a lot of high-powered thought going on in these rooms. So wonderful that you guys are putting this on. This is an important topic for me. We're going to talk about walking through the door of discomfort. And this is an opportunity to talk about recognizing when those doors are open and that it actually is an opportunity, not being fearful of walking through to not know what's on the other side. So we're going to spend some time talking about some of those examples that I've experienced in my career and sharing some of the tools with you that I think will help you on your career journey. So again, thank you for inviting me to speak today. So in today's discussion, I'll just go through just a little bit of my background so you can get to know me a little bit. We'll spend the most of our time going through my career journey and going through those open doors and what I mean when I say an open door and how to actually create your own doors to walk through. And then I'll teach you how to go through a life journey map, a career journey map, and what happens when you merge those on top of each other to really see what story it tells about how you respond to challenges and change. We're going to talk a little bit about tools in your toolbox when it comes to mentors, coaches, sponsors, and why it's really important to have your board of directors around you. We'll talk about, we've all known good leaders, some not so good leaders, so kind of lessons learned from them on how do you determine what type of leader that you want to be. And then we'll end our discussion today with some key takeaways and a Q&A session. So first, just a little bit about me. I work at Cargill, as Diana mentioned. I'm the CIO for Protein North America. Been there about 2.5 years now, and I've really been excited on some of the transformational things we've been able to do. So I have one of those really unique roles where I have one foot in the business and one foot in IT. So that means I have a direct line of reporting into IT and a dotted line report into the CEO of Protein North America. They are driving some pretty amazing things out in the industry that tie in with our mission statement. So we try to nourish the world in a safe, responsible way so that we truly can make sure that we are providing food to everybody in the world. And that's a mission statement that really speaks to me because I'm a farm girl at heart. So all the things we're trying to do, like putting together a factory of the future, how do we utilize artificial intelligence? How do we use data and analytics to truly help us really utilize that information to do predictive decisions. So again, just some really, really cool things we're working on. In the left-hand corner of the screen, these are my daughters. They are 20-year-old twins that are juniors in college. They go to different colleges. The one on the left is Caitlin. She goes to University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. The one on the right is Kylie. She goes to Miami University of Ohio. Caitlin is majoring in marketing with a minor in psychology. Kylie is getting her Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and then she's going to go on to get her doctorate to become a nurse anesthetist. So it's pretty interesting being an empty nester right now. So when they're gone, I have my little four-legged friends that keep me company at home. So the dog in the middle here is Piper. She's a 7-year-old Shih Tzu, and her little buddy Bo on the right is a 4-year-old Shih Tzu Poodle. So they hang out with me, pretty much go everywhere I go and keep me busy while my girls are gone. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in Iowa, very small farm town about 10 miles east of Okoboji, Iowa, where it's one of the only natural lakes. And it's a little town of about 350 people, so pretty small, but it was an interesting experience. You know all your neighbors, you know everybody's great-grandmothers. It was just a really interesting experience to grow up when you are a farmer, and my dad had a lot of work ethic. So he really taught us, you work hard in the morning, you work hard in the afternoon, you fit your sports in between, but it's always back to work ethic. And so when I graduated from high school, I decided, I've experienced the small town. I want to go to the biggest university I could find that has my major. So back then we didn't have computers. We just had brochures. So I randomly picked what I thought would be the great university that I would go to, which is Iowa State University, because they had graphic design. So I went there for 4 years, and upon graduating from Iowa State, I had a job offer to either go to Chicago or to come to Minneapolis, and I chose Minneapolis. And that is where my career journey starts. So when I came up to Minneapolis, I worked at a renowned little design firm called the Design Center. And I was there probably just a couple of months when I got married, and just a couple of months after that, my then husband had experienced cancer, coming back for the second time. So it's very interesting how that life journey comes into your career journey and the things that it influences at the time. So at that point, my then husband couldn't work. So I ended up working my day job at the Design Center, working in an afternoon job. And I decided, okay, I need a night job to cover the bills, right? So I ended up contacting Robert Half International to see, can they contract me through a night job? So I did, and I was working at Arcadia Financial in their call center at night. And one day I got a phone call from Robert Half that said, hey, listen, we need a favor from you. We have had a mistake at Arcadia Financial Corporate, and we really need your help to fulfill a full-time role there. If you'd be willing to interview, we need your help because you're someone we trust. We know you do a good job. Would you go in and interview with them? And I said, well, I'd be happy to, as long as it's in graphic design. And they had said, well, it's in their marketing communications department, but it's an executive assistant job. And at the time I told them, this doesn't fit my career path. I'd like to do graphic design. And they said, Robin, go do the research on the company and see what you can bring to the table for them. So I did my research, and I showed up in my interview, and I was very curious in the questions that I asked, and it confirmed everything I had learned in my research. So I decided I had nothing to lose. So I decided to create a door for myself, and I went in and said, I could do the executive assistant job. What I also understand is that your national sales agents that are all across the country don't have any place to go and get their marketing materials, all of their advertising, their current rate sheets. So instead of sending them to them on a weekly basis after you make all the updates, what if you made this role into a web administrator and I created your very first portal? And I don't know if they just didn't understand what I was saying to them or they actually believed in it, but they ended up opening the door to it and said that would be great. So I did just that. I created their first portal with all their marketing materials and their sales agents. Never had to worry if it was updated or not. I did all of the graphic design for their golf tournaments and pretty much all their marketing materials. So it was a pretty fun experience for me, but that was a door that I created in order to walk through it and present them something in return. So I stayed there for about 1.5 years. And when one of my coworkers had left and gone to Best Buy, a couple of months after they left, they reached out to me and said, Robin, there's a really interesting job at Best Buy I think you'd be a good fit for. So I checked it out and I interviewed and I got hired as their senior web art director. So in that role, I was hired to build or redesign their current intranet and build them their very first portal. So I did this, built up a great team around me, but I had to go down to IT 4 to 5 times a day to ask them to reload my content replicating system jobs, my batch jobs, move my code. And it got to be a running joke that every time I would go down there, I would ask them, hey, I'm here to run my CRS jobs again, or you guys could just give me access and I could do it by myself so I don't have to bother you. And I was politely told there's no way in hell I'd be given access to do that myself. So I had to keep going down there. But one day, one of my friends had said, hey, listen, our boss wants to talk with you. And right away, I went to the negative for some reason. And I was half joking that said, okay, what I'm in trouble for now. And they said, no, Wade, our manager, wants to talk to you about a potential job. And I thought he was kidding me completely because we did that a lot. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, Wade came around the corner and asked if I was ready to talk. And the mortified look on my face probably told it all. I wasn't expecting it. So we went, sat down in a room and we started talking about this IT role. And he said, Robin, I've got an IT project manager role that I think you'd be a great fit for. I think you know the team very well. They respect you. You've got good partnerships. I think you could drive a lot of change in this team. And instead of kind of just taking in the situation and understanding what I actually do bring to the table, I instead questioned him, which was my first mistake. And I said, Wade, I don't even have a computer science degree. I have a graphic design degree. Why would I come to an IT team? And he said, Robin, I see leadership qualities in you that I think you could drive a lot of great things in this role. You'd be the greenest person on the team. You'd be the only female, but I believe in what you could do. And that hit home with me. And it kind of made me realize I took the wrong negative approach. Instead of asking, I shouldn't have asked why I'm there. I should have brought forth what I could bring to the table. And so I ended up taking the role. And about 1.5 years later, my manager moved on and took another role. And I was actually promoted. So went from being the greenest person on the team to now I was leading the internet services group. And over time, I gained more responsibilities over the years. And about 1.5 years, 2 years later, a new leader came on, and his name was Tom. And Tom, when he came into this team, brought forth the BestBuy.com website and back-end operations. So we took it from being third-party hosted back internally. So he asked me, without even really knowing me, if I take on the back-end operations. And so I did. So he and I got to know each other pretty well over the years. And he came to me one day and he said, I keep hearing about this thing called ITIL, Robin. I don't know anything about it. I don't know if we need to do it, but I'd like you to go research it and then come back and tell me, do we need to build out a capability for it? So I went and researched it and come to find out, yes, I explained why we absolutely need to build up a capability for ITIL. And so he said, all right, you got to do it, build up your team, but you still keep your same responsibilities with everything else you have on your plate. So I stepped into it, not knowing what I was going into. So there's another door that was open. I went and got all my certifications. I came back, I built up the team, and lo and behold, a few months later, we badge flipped from Best Buy to become Accenture employees. And what that meant was the contract that was just negotiated by Accenture and Best Buy, I now inherited how we had to fulfill all the services. And remind you, the day before that, we were all Best Buy employees. So we had an executive team that knew where all the dead bodies lay, where we were not doing well, where our applications were not performing well. And now we have to be held accountable to financial penalties. So because I had all that ITIL training and because all the financial penalties went under the SLAs, now I had to own it. So it was a very, very interesting time that if I hadn't walked through that ITIL door, I would have never been presented with that opportunity to work in a very different way with the executive team. Now, over the next 4 years of being with Accenture, we had lots of leaders that came and went. And I got to a point where I did have a leader that came in that didn't treat me very well. I was a female. He didn't respect females. And all of a sudden, my values were being challenged. And it wasn't a comfortable position for me to be in. So I could either look for another role within Accenture that didn't report to him. I could look externally. I could pave my way, whatever I wanted to do. So I started looking externally and found a job over at United Health Group. I applied for it and I got the job. So I was part of the UHGIT, and I was part of building out the very first office of the CIO with Alistair Jacques, and that was for Medicare and retirement. And once that was built up and successful, he asked me to go over and build that up for community and state. So I did that as well. And so that was another interesting door that was open because I was the single hire in community and state while we were looking for other team members to come and fill the portfolio, the architecture roles, and so forth. So it was a really interesting opportunity for me. Once that was all built up, I had somebody tap me on the shoulder to say, there is an interesting opportunity in Boston. It's going out there with a team of folks to fix the Massachusetts Health Exchange. It's a switch in roles, but you have 24 hours to decide if you want to get on the plane or not. And at that time in my personal life, you know, my kids are older now. I've been coaching them ever since they were 5 years old with the sport of the season on top of their real competitive sports. But at this point in time, I had a coaching contract for volleyball at the high school level. So this was a big decision I couldn't just walk away from. But I talked with my family and I decided I don't know what to expect, but I'll never know unless I walk through that door. So I got on the plane the next day. I went out to Boston, and sure enough, it was an interesting opportunity. It was working with 3 arms of the government that really didn't get along, didn't really agree on where we were going, but had to find some way to find middle ground to figure out what we were going to do with the health exchange. In the United Health Group side, there were 3 different arms of UHG that had never really worked together, but had to figure out how we would do this. And I was out there about 6.5 months, and what a great opportunity to see how this all works, get that government experience. And I've got a lot of lessons learned that came out of that. But the whole time I was out there, I had been in contact. Somebody had called me from an executive recruiting firm that had said, hey, would you ever consider moving into a construction company as a CIO? And I automatically turned it down. And I said, I don't know anything about construction. It's smaller. I don't know if that's something I'd be interested in. And quite frankly, it just wasn't a sexy role. And they kept conning me into it. So I did go through the interview process. It was a 7-month interview process, and I ended up getting the CIO role. So when I got to Mortensen Construction, wow, it was walking through a new door of experiences because I'd never been on an executive team. I'd never created my own strategy for what I wanted to do with all the technology, where we wanted to go. But over the course of 3 years, we executed against that strategy, did a 2-year security program. I raised the engagement level by 14 points on the IT team. So just wonderful experiences. And then the last 3 months I was there, we got a new CEO, CFO, and a COO. It's a lot of change at the executive team. And I was asked not to come back. It thoroughly crushed me. I didn't know what I did wrong, or if I did anything wrong, or if I just didn't fit in with the new executive team. because I wasn't given a reason. I'll never know the reason. And I wish I had that as a lesson learned to know why it didn't work out. But all I could do was move forward. In 1 year, I had twins going off to college. It didn't feel good, but I had to find my way. So I right away started networking with 3 to 5 people every single day during the week, with the hopes that those folks would introduce me to other opportunities or might know of companies that had opportunities. And by doing that networking, I really created some meaningful connections with people that will be friends forever, I will communicate with forever in different companies. And that led me to one day I was having a cup of coffee with Miss Jenny Jeffords, whom I respect ultimately. And we were sitting at Caribou. I had just came out of the gym early in the morning, hair piled on top of my head, sweat running down my face, still in my gym clothes. And about halfway through our coffee, Jenny said, "Hey, your top 5 companies," Cargill was at the top, right? And I said, "Yes, why?" She said, "Well, the gentleman that just walked in is from Cargill. I know him. So at the end of our meeting, I'll connect you." And I said, "Oh my gosh, Jenny, look at me. I look terrible." And she held up her finger and she goes, "Figure it out, girl. You got to do this." So at the end of the meeting, she introduced me. And at that time, it was Joe Paoli. And Joe said, "Hey, Robin, this is my last week at Cargill. I'm moving my family to a different company on the East Coast. Get me your 1-page bio and your resume today, and I will get it into the right people." Kind of rolled my eyes in the back of my head, just kind of going, this will never happen. 2 days later, Justin Kershaw, the global CIO, reached out to me and gave me an informational interview with him and HR and one other gentleman. They didn't have any roles open, I'm told, but had some great conversations. And 3 weeks later, I was offered 2 different roles that I had the choice of either one of them. And I ended up choosing the role I'm in today. So again, in those moments where you think you're just networking and having a cup of coffee, you never know what will come out of those meetings and who you might meet and what doors they might unexpectedly open for you. So what I had learned to do when I was at Mortensen, they took us through an exercise to document your career journey in a journey map. And I won't go through all of these dots for you, but you choose it on your timeline. And the goal of this is I chose every 2 years to see where my peaks in my career were and where my valleys were in my career. And then once you get through this, you should put in your big things, your promotions, maybe your first speaking event, maybe your first award, and see how this all maps out. Then do the same thing with your life journey. And I will just go through this very briefly. My life journey started, as I mentioned, getting married right out of college. 3 months later, his cancer came back. And over then, for the course of that next year, he was going through treatments of all sorts to gear up for his bone marrow and stem cell transplant. And that also helped us learn about fertility issues that we both had. And so for 4.5 years, we had been trying to have a child and nothing was working until a very specific scientific procedure helped us have our miracle twins. And about 3 years later, we separated. And a year later, I decided to try and give that marriage a second chance. And a lot of things happened over those next few years after that. And about the time I was going to United Health Group for a job, one of my most amazing friends passed away. And so at that point, I had rode his motorcycle. I've always been riding motorcycles since I was 7 years old. I decided to trade in my Honda Shadow and get my first Harley. So why not? Isn't that what everybody does, right? So I got my first Harley, and a couple of years later, I joined my first board. Year later, I started coaching volleyball at the high school level, joined my third board a year later, and then some pretty significant life events happened. My mentor in life was my aunt, and she committed suicide. Couple of months later, I got a divorce. A year later, I joined my fifth board, In 2018, my kids graduated from high school. 2 weeks later, my dad tragically passed away. 2 months later, my kids go off to college, and now all of a sudden I find myself incredibly alone as an empty nester. And so I had to pick myself back up, and I started traveling with other empty nesters and joined my 8th board. Why I walk you through these things is when you overlay those on top of each other, it starts to tell a story about yourself. So for me, what I realize when I am down in my valley, which is the red line, when I'm in my valleys of going through some pretty significant things in my life, I've learned that I focus in on my career, I focus in my family. I need something to push me through to pick back up. And that was my career here. So then you see my career picking up, my life peak gets back and caught up, and then took another valley, right? As my career kept going. So what I learned about myself is it was never a parallel path, they're in opposite paths. And so for me, I needed something to concentrate on either in my personal life when my work wasn't going well, or when my career was going well, picking my life back up. So I encourage you to do this career and life journey map to see what story yours tells and what is it about you when you encounter challenge and change. How do you overcome it? You rely on a lot of those tools in your toolbox. And what I want to talk to you about is making sure that you have mentors, coaches, sponsors, and your board of directors. Those are tools that you're going to depend on a lot as you go through your career journey. But first you have to know what they mean. So mentors talk with you. They're the people that there's no duration of being a mentor. It could be a life mentor on a personal level. It could be for work, but they will give you advice all the way through. Your coaches on a very different level talk to you. So they're the ones that are going to give you very direct feedback. They're going to give you a certain set of deliverables with expected outcomes in order to help you elevate to the next level or achieve something in a very short amount of time. So you're going to want coaches. Sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're coaches within your organization. Your sponsors are the ones that talk about you. So your sponsors are going to be the ones that watch you go through your career. They could be inside your company, outside your company. They could be out in the industry, but they're the ones that are going to open doors for you by talking to others about why you might be a good fit in a particular role or a particular opportunity. And then a board of directors. Make sure you have a board of directors that come from all walks of life, different companies, different ways of working with you, because they're the ones that you can reach out to and ask for, hey, I think I have this opportunity coming. Here's what I think the pros and cons are. What do you think I should do? And to give you that direct advice because they are trusted. They've been with you all the way along. Those are going to be the people that help you along that career journey. So these are what you need as tools in your toolbox and knowing when to use particular tools. We've all had some great leaders and we've all had some not so great leaders. But the important thing to know is you can learn from each of those. And it's all about those good leaders see potential in people. They're the ones that are going to open doors for you. They inspire others that people now want to work for them or respect them in different ways. They're the ones that give feedback and create stretch opportunities for themselves, but also for you. They've learned how to challenge others in a very professional way. They establish trust built on meaningful connections and meaningful relationships. Now, those other leaders that maybe not as good as the great leaders, the things you can learn from them. Remember how you feel when doors are not opened for you. Remember how it feels when you're disengaged. And that lack of feedback coming to you, it doesn't help you drive change either in yourself or in others or in opportunities. So you have to figure out how you stretch yourself and create those opportunities for you and others. Challenge yourself to walk through those doors that are very uncertain, and you're not going to know what's on the other side, but don't be afraid to fail. Challenge others. I learned a great quote when I was back at Best Buy from a very trusted leader: trust but verify. So for me, I trust people inherently when I meet them. You don't have to earn your trust with me, but you do have to verify. So go verify that they're doing what they say they're doing or what they committed to do, but give them that trust in the beginning. And understand the difference between networking and meaningful connections, like what I walked you through when I was in between Mortensen and Cargill. It's very different. You can show up to an event with a goal to meet 5 new people, but are they people that you want to have meaningful connections with, that you're going to stay connected with over time? It's very interesting. I love this quote: the best leaders get curious in very complex times. The best leaders lean in. When times get hard, they lean in, they listen, and they learn. And I love that, because that makes me want to be a different type of leader. And these are the types of things you have to find in yourself to determine what type of leader you want to be. So we talked about a lot of things today, and I want to give you a few key takeaways today. My first one is walk through that door of discomfort. You're not going to know what it's going to feel like on that other side of the door. You're not going to know if you're going to fail, but if you do, that's okay, because you already know what tools you have in your toolbox that you can fall back on. It's so important to walk through that door, because when you get through it, it may be very uncomfortable, and you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And in times like that, there will be other doors that are opened beyond that. So walk through that door. Create opportunities for yourself. No one else is going to. So go out and talk to your peers about what you're passionate about, what excites you, and where you see yourself going. Talk to other leaders about that, because you never know when they might remember those conversations and come back to you with an opportunity. Know when to network versus a meaningful connection. We've talked about that quite a bit. Utilize mentors, coaches, sponsors. Create your board of directors. It's so important when you have those big challenges or situations you need advice in, or do you want to walk through that door that's unknown? So create your board of directors. And then I really encourage you to reflect back on your life and career journey maps, overlap them, and determine, what does your story tell you about how you deal with challenge and change? And does that change where you go on your journey map? So thank you for inviting me to talk about some of my lessons learned in my career journey, and some of the things that, I was faced with adversity, and how I recovered from some of those. I hope you can take away some of those lessons learned and think about the tools that you have in your toolbox. Think about the things that are on your life and your career journey and where you go with them. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk to you today. And Diana, I think we go back to you for Q&A.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for this amazing presentation, and especially for having an open and honest conversation, because I feel like a lot of time you see an executive and you don't realize they went through the same things you're going through today, because they think, oh, somehow these things magically appeared or things happened to them. They got lucky. No, that's not the story. You don't see you don't see all the hard work that goes into it. Thank you for sharing all of that. We have a lot of questions in the chat window, so I will take a couple of questions. A lot of people ask, how do you find your sponsors, coaches, board of directors? They are asking, did you have to hire a paid coach or rely on more of personal, professional friends and advisors?
Yeah, so I'll kind of address each of them differently. So when I first look at my mentors, I look at leaders I aspire to be, that have either made a huge impact in the community, the industry, could be in the company, or somebody that's really touched my life. When I look back through my career journey, I can say Wade Anderson, the first person that got me into IT, I had no idea the impact he was going to be on my career as a mentor. And he stayed as a mentor. I still reach out to him today. Tom Munt was also at Best Buy. He was the second leader that gave me chance with the bestbuy.com websites. He was one that opened doors and trusted in me, and through some of my personal things was there in a different way for me as a leader and coached me on some things I really kind of needed to reflect on. And so he became not only a mentor, but a coach. And so he would be a trusted advisor that I would go to actually ask some hard questions about myself and what I need to do to get to that next level. When it came to sponsors, they kind of happened naturally. That stems from the mentors I had, but also people in the industry, as Dee Thibodeau was the one that launched me into speaking events, and that was not my thing. But as a favor to her, she had somebody drop at the last minute, and she asked me to come in and speak, and I said no. She wasn't accepting no. She put my name on the event, and I did it anyways. But that was another opportunity I didn't even realize I was walking through, because I started doing more speaking events. I kind of fell into it. I started meeting new people in the industry, and people I started meeting, they started opening doors for me. So they became some of my sponsors. Other people I met in other events, they became some of my sponsors. So it really, I would encourage you, look for people that you really aspire to be, who are the good leaders, and who has seen you in your career journey all along. So go back to past companies as well.
Thank you, Robin, for sharing that. I have another question that I am very curious to learn about that too. She's asking, I'm curious what your experience has been sharing and reflecting on your journey in such a vulnerable way while working in some more traditionally masculine industries like construction or agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is something that's been very hard for me. I like to keep myself to my stuff to myself. You know, it's hard when you go through those challenging times. And I did a lot of reflection of, wow, how did I get here? Right? That was a job I loved. And my coach had said, Robin, one of your biggest things is you have to be vulnerable. You have to let people in. It will gain a different type of respect as a leader when you actually share your feelings about not just the good times, but some of those pretty tragic times and the times in your career where you did have your valleys and it wasn't always a peak. Share that. People can learn from it. It's hard to do. It's hard to be vulnerable and say, you're not perfect. I've stubbed my toe. I broke my foot many times in my career journey. And when you go into some of these very masculine industries, you learn to have some very thick skin, right? I think the very first job site I attended, I'm not kidding, I was told off with some pretty aggressive language when I walked in. Not because I was female, but because I was IT that would never listen to them on the construction job site in what their needs really were. And so for the first time, somebody in IT was showing up to listen, but they're kind of like, what's IT doing here? So when I learned it wasn't about me, it just happened to be I was a female and I went out on a job site to learn about what's wrong and what I could do to help them. You can apply that in any company, but you just need to learn it's really not about you. Figure out how to be curious and ask, why are there such horrible feelings towards IT? And I'm here to listen. How can I help you get through it? And it really changes the conversations from a partnership level.
Thank you, Robin. We only have 1 minute, so maybe this is the last question. Someone asking how to stay connected with the people you reach in LinkedIn. How do you create just a connection versus a meaningful connection? How do you do that?
You have to foster it. Those people that I connected with over my transition between Mortensen and Cargill, I realized of all the people I've met in my entire career, I see them at networking events, I wave, I ask how their families are doing, but that's not keeping up with a meaningful connection. You have to meet with them, have a cup of coffee. You have to ask what's going on in their industry. You have to talk about work, talk about families, but keep those relationships up, because it's hard to call someone when you haven't kept up in 15 years and say, all of a sudden, I'm out of a job. Can you help me? Do you know of any jobs? And if you haven't kept that up, that means you haven't been networking in the right way with meaningful connections. And that was a big reflection on, okay, now I never want to put myself in that position again. Keep those relationships up that I really want to foster. Those are my meaningful connections. And now how can I help others that are in transition or looking to help them realize, how do you network the right way and make those meaningful connections so you can further on your connections in the industry and where your journey might lead you.
Thank you so much, Robin. That wraps up our conversation today. Thanks again for the amazing presentation. And thank you everyone for joining with us. And bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.